The first time anyone heard Mateo sing, it wasn't on a stage. It wasn't under lights, or behind microphones, or in front of cameras waiting to turn someone's pain into applause. It was on a quiet December morning in Manila, beside a broken jeepney that would never run again. Mateo was 8 years old, small even for his age, with a thin frame that made his oversized school uniform hang like borrowed hope. His slippers were worn flat at the heel, and his toes peeked through the front like they, too, were searching for something better. His mother sold peril lanterns by the roadside. Handmade ones, stitched from colored paper and bamboo sticks. She worked carefully, even when customers passed without stopping, even when her fingers trembled from hunger she pretended not to feel. Mateo helped by holding them up, his arms stretching toward strangers who barely looked down. That morning, a church bell rang in the distance. It was a soft sound. Gentle, lonely. Mateo tilted his head. He listened. Then he sang. His voice rose without warning, fragile at first, like glass unsure whether it would break. The song was an old Filipino Christmas hymn his grandmother used to hum before she passed away, a song about light finding its way home, about hope waiting in darkness. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried something heavier than volume. It carried truth. People slowed down. A woman carrying groceries stopped mid-step. A driver leaned out his window. A boy on a bicycle forgot to pedal. Mateo sang like he wasn't trying to be heard. He sang like he was trying to remember. His mother froze beside him, a lantern in her hands. Her eyes filled with tears she quickly wiped away, embarrassed by her own emotion. When Mateo finished, silence lingered in the air. Then someone clapped. One person. Then another. Then many. Mateo blinked, startled, as if he'd just woken from a dream he didn't realize he'd fallen into. That day, his mother sold every lantern. Not because they were beautiful, but because people remembered the boy who sang beside them. Weeks passed. Christmas crept closer. The city grew brighter, louder, heavier with expectation. But Mateo's home remained quiet. His father had left years ago to work overseas and never returned. Letters stopped. Calls faded. Eventually, even hope learned to stop knocking. Mateo never asked why. Children understand silence better than adults realize. One afternoon, while Mateo sang beside the lantern stand again, a woman stopped in front of him. She wasn't dressed like the others. Her coat was thick, foreign, and her eyes carried the curiosity of someone who had traveled far enough to recognize rare things. She waited until he finished. "What is your name?" she asked softly. Mateo hesitated. "Mateo," he whispered. She smiled. "Mateo," she repeated, as if testing the shape of his future. Her name was Elena Petrov. She was a choir director visiting the Philippines for a cultural exchange program. She had spent her life searching for voices, not perfect ones, but honest ones. And Mateo's voice had found her first. She returned the next day. And the next. Each time, she listened. Each time, she cried. Finally, she asked Mateo's mother a question that sounded impossible. May he sing in Moscow? Mateo's mother stared at her, unsure whether she'd heard correctly. Moscow. Elena nodded. A Christmas concert. One of the largest in the world. Mateo's mother almost laughed, not because it was funny. Because it was too beautiful to be real. They had no money, no connections, no reason to believe the world even knew they existed. But Elena insisted. "I will arrange everything," she said. Mateo didn't fully understand what Moscow was. But he understood his mother's tears. And he understood that, sometimes, tears meant something good. The plane was louder than Mateo expected. He pressed his face to the window, watching Manila shrink into memory. Clouds swallowed everything he knew. For the first time in his life, Mateo felt the weight of distance. His mother held his hand tightly. Neither of them slept, not because they were afraid. Because they were afraid to wake up and discover it had all been a dream. Moscow was cold, colder than anything Mateo had ever imagined. The air bit his cheeks, and his breath turned visible, like proof he was still alive. The cathedral stood in front of him like something carved from silence and time. Its towering domes reached toward heaven as if asking questions no one could answer. Mateo felt small, smaller than he had ever felt. Inside, the cathedral was even more overwhelming. Thousands of seats, golden arches, Lights waiting patiently. Elena knelt in front of him. Are you afraid? She asked gently. Mateo thought carefully. Then he nodded. Elena smiled. That means you care. She placed a hand over his heart. Just sing from here. The night of the performance arrived. The cathedral filled with people from all over the world. Some came for tradition. Some came for music. None came for Mateo. He stood backstage, wearing a borrowed suit slightly too large for his shoulders. His hands trembled. His mother knelt beside him. You don't have to be perfect, she whispered. Mateo looked at her. He saw every sacrifice she never spoke about. Every hunger she hid. Every hope she protected. He nodded. Not because he wasn't afraid. Because he was ready. When Mateo stepped onto the stage, the lights blinded him. He couldn't see the audience. Only darkness beyond brightness. The microphone stood in front of him like a question. For a moment, he forgot how to breathe. The cathedral waited. Then Mateo closed his eyes. And he remembered the broken jeepney. The lanterns. His grandmother's voice. His mother's hands. And he sang. The first note floated into the air like snow. Soft. Fragile. Uncertain. Then it grew. Stronger. Clearer. His voice filled the cathedral, not with power, but with something deeper. Pain. Hope. Love. The kind of love that survives absence. The kind of hope that survives disappointment. The kind of pain that teaches you how to sing. People stopped breathing. Some leaned forward. Some covered their mouths. A woman in the front row began to cry. Then another. Then many. Mateo didn't see them. He sang for someone who wasn't there. For his father. For the goodbye he never heard. For the questions he never asked. For the answer he never received. His voice cracked. Just slightly. But it didn't break. It became more real. More human. More unforgettable. By the final note, the cathedral had transformed. It was no longer a building. It was a heartbeat. And Mateo was its voice. Silence followed. Not empty silence. Sacred silence. The kind that exists when something true has just happened. Then someone stood. One person. Then another. Then everyone. The applause exploded, echoing against the cathedral walls like thunder. People cried openly. Strangers held hands. Some didn't clap. They simply stood frozen, unable to move past what they had just felt. Mateo opened his eyes. He didn't understand why they were crying. He had only sung. Backstage, Elena embraced him tightly. You did it, she whispered. Mateo looked confused. I just sang. Elena smiled through tears. Yes, she said. That's why. The performance was broadcast across the world. Millions watched. Millions listened. Millions felt something they couldn't explain. A boy from Manila, who had nothing, had given them something they didn't know they needed. His voice crossed oceans, crossed languages, crossed loneliness. In homes filled with light, and homes filled with silence, people cried together. Not because they knew Mateo, but because they knew his pain, and his hope. Back in Manila, neighbors gathered around a small television. They watched Mateo stand in a place none of them had ever seen. They watched him sing the same song he sang beside the broken jeepney. But now, the world was listening. His mother sat beside them, her hands shaking. Not from fear, from pride. After the concert, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived, not to Elena, not to the cathedral, but to Mateo. It had no return address. Inside, only a few words. I heard you sing. I am sorry. I never stopped loving you. Papa. Mateo stared at the letter for a long time. He didn't cry, not because he wasn't hurt. Because he finally understood. Some people leave, but love doesn't always leave with them. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it listens. Sometimes it finds its way back through a song. Mateo folded the letter carefully. He didn't know if he would ever see his father again. But he knew something else now. His voice could reach places he could not. His voice could carry love across distance. His voice could heal things words never could. Years later, people would still talk about that night. Not because the boy was perfect, but because he was real. Because he reminded the world that greatness doesn't come from having everything. It comes from losing something. And choosing to sing anyway. And somewhere, on a quiet December morning, beside a roadside filled with lanterns, another child would begin to sing. Not knowing the world was listening. Not knowing the world needed him. Just like Mateo once did. And somewhere far away, someone would cry. Not from sadness, but from recognition. Because one Filipino song had done what nothing else could. It reminded the world how to feel again.